You're listening to the Lawyers with Purpose Practice Success podcast, hosted by Lisa Rozier, featuring attorney Dave Zampano, along with frequent guests. Whether you're a seasoned estate planning attorney, an attorney looking to add estate planning and elder law to your existing list of practice areas, or you're just starting out, this podcast will give you a solid plan for success. Listen now as Dave and his guests share their personal journeys to practice success and the insights they learned along the way.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Lawyers with Purpose Practice Success podcast, where it's all about sharing with each other and other colleagues our story. What is it that made our success where we are today? What are we still learning? And what are some of the gems we could share with others? So today, we're so thrilled to have Lydia York with us, an estate planning, elder law, and asset protection attorney. And so, Lydia, I'd love to hear your story, where you are, your team, where you started, where you are now. Did you transition into this area? Have you always done it? And any gems of success along the way you think other people, lawyers just like you now or just like you in the past, would say, wow, that's really cool. How are you, Miss Lydia?
I'm fine, thank you. And thank you for having me. So, the first thing I think people ought to know is I call it a second career attorney. I spent the first, roughly, I looked back at the calendar, I was like, it really was about half my life doing other things. And then, as my family so politely says it, I fell and bumped my head and went to law school. Now, when I went to law school, it was my intention to specialize in taxation. But not that I couldn't handle the coursework, I actually did that. I have an LLM in taxation. But I decided that perhaps a better use of that would be, frankly, estate planning. So I started tilting in that direction, even while I was still in law school. But when I got out of law school, I was offered a clerkship, so I took it, and spent that time finishing up my LLM.
For what kind of judge?
For a regular civil matters judge in Middlesex Vicinage, New Jersey, which is New Brunswick.
Awesome.
So
you're a judge's clerk doing that while you got your LLM.
Yeah, it worked out. They were on the same train line. So
Something unique for some people listening might then never have to worry about.
Right. I could go from work to almost all the way to campus with one train. It was Amtrak, but I could manage it. And so it worked. And frankly, while I was doing that, I met another LWP now, a fellow you may have heard of him, Jeff Palomo. We took a class together. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. So that was a fun thing that I ran into later on.
Oh, so you had been in the same class and you just by coincidence met up again. And you both ended up members in the same organization. Exactly. Isn't that wild? So you're in the LLM program with him, and that's really cool. I never heard that story. That's really cool.
He was very thoughtful and would take me back to the train station after class. So I was.
That's Jeff. Yeah, he's just an incredible. Yeah, I love that. Never heard that story. That's pretty wild.
So, but I then spent some time. I thought I was going to change locations. But that didn't work out because when I finished my clerkship, it was 2008.
Gotcha.
That was just a tough time all around. And then that's when I thought, okay, I practice in Delaware. I live in Delaware. I should practice in Delaware. And so I should take the Delaware bar. And while I was finishing up the requirements for that, I ran into a fellow who was the Register of Wills in the county where I'm located. And it just turned out that he was not what you might think of as your typical register and wills kind of guy. He was, I call him a Mr. Delaware. He is known down the state, and sideways between, Maryland and the Delaware River. I mean, he knows everybody everywhere. And I sort of hooked up with him and started not necessarily into estates and trusts right away, but I did learn the probate process pretty much upside and down and sideways there. And more importantly, learned who the clerks were in the
Yes. So that's pretty funny, true, right? When you do that probate trust admin work, it's really about working with the clerks to get the process through, because you're not in control of that process, they are. So it's about making sure you meet their check marks. They all have these check marks they have to get.
It is much easier if we make their life easier. That's sort of the way, I tell my
Well,
clients all the
I
time.
guess there's an insight then right there, right? That along the way, I hear two insights in your story so far. The first insight I hear, there might even be three. The first insight I heard was, hey, always be present. You never know when people you come across, you're going to run into them again, right? That's really kind of wild. The second insight I heard is you got really lucky that you met that gentleman who is the clerk of wills in Delaware. Now, we have an old saying where I come from. Luck, actually, it's not an old saying. I forget who said this, but it's somebody well known. I just always forget who to give credit to, but if you Google it, you'll know. They said luck is when opportunity meets preparation. So in your mindset, you were already preparing, you wanted to do that. So when you met this gentleman, it probably triggered a reaction differently because you're in that mindset of what you wanted.
I did. I mean, literally, I was participating in a pro bono event that he attended. It was called Wills for Seniors. He attended, and I said, well, what's the worst thing that can happen if I just literally put my resume in his hand?
Right. That's pretty wild. So that's even another story, Lydia, and I say back because one of the core values that we espound here is generous. So you're doing a pro bono, right? Isn't this, I mean, we couldn't write the book on this, but going out doing something well for others ended up connecting with someone who actually had an impact on yours. So you met with them and you started working with them.
Right. And he wasn't doing estate planning, as you imagine. He's constrained, but his father was not.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So his father was a lawyer, not doing it for the state, but doing it on his own, his own practice, I assume.
Exactly. And he is a well-respected and esteemed member of our bar. He's literally been before the bar for 60 years now.
Isn't that something?
I saw him at an event a couple of weeks ago. And so he still, gets up every morning, shaves, puts on a shirt and tie and a jacket, and goes into his office. He's still working. Okay.
I love that. So did you work with him?
Beg your pardon?
Did you work with him?
I did. I do. I think as a true practice mentor.
Gotcha.
I have either a deep issue or confusion, or I just need some help.
So I think that's another lesson is building a bench of mentors or resources. I call them colleagues. Like we love it here at the LWP community because, like you said, you met up with Jeff and now he's in the same community. You connect with him and others. I think that's an important message that was important to you along the way, is building a bench of people that were kind of there, for you to bounce some things off.
And he knows, I shouldn't say he knows everything, but he's got to know everything after 60 years.
Yeah, right. He may have, I always say people like that forgot more than I know. Right.
Probably at this point. But so, by hook and by crook, I ended up at a firm that was the legal shield provider in this jurisdiction. Okay. And it just so happened, because our jurisdiction is so small, that we were attached to the legal shield provider in New Jersey, which is much bigger. Oh. Yeah. And so as between the three states, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware got attached to New Jersey, which really seems odd because there's a whole river between us and them. Versus Pennsylvania and Delaware are on the same interstate, but that's another story, I'm sure. But there,
so you started doing legal shield.
I was working at a firm that provides legal shield. Yes. It's hard to do legal shield because it's a responsive kind of thing. And, if I learned anything there, what I really learned was how to respond, as quickly as you can. when someone calls. That was sort of what was one of the key metrics, was how long did it take you to call them back? And how many
Gotcha.
times did you call them back?
And Legal Shield was like one of those big prepaid legal services, right?
Yeah.
People get as an employee benefit or something. So you get a will for $49 or something. Or...
I think in their setup, it was actually free.
I
So,
gotcha.
so they had a standard stock questionnaire. They would fill it out and for a long time, mail it in. Toward the end of my tenure there, they started emailing it. There was created an app where they could fill in the questionnaire and they'd send it in. And we hadn't gotten to the point where we could just take that file and dump it into our preset document, but it was close. We're getting there.
Yeah. So fast forward to where you are today. What happened between there and here?
Well, what happened between there and here was I decided, the truth is, I was getting, maybe not every day, but probably at least once or twice a week, I was getting a question about Medicaid. And I had only limited opportunity. There was only so much I could do to help them.
Right.
And because of that, I started searching for Medicaid solutions. And I don't know, if you're a practitioner, you start figuring out, well, where do I go? How do I start? You're not going to get very far because there is, I would say, about nothing about that you need to know about Medicaid. Okay?
Yeah, my old experience was you'd go to CLEs and the takeaway was, if you need something, call me and I'll do it for you. It was basically, they teach you a little bit and said, well, don't worry, here's my card, call me if you need me to help you on stuff, kind of thing.
And part of me now understands that because it is highly, as I used to tell litigants, it's highly fact sensitive. Okay.
Yeah.
And it is highly fact sensitive. But what I also learned was that people were both anxious and fearful about the whole process.
Got it.
And that frankly disturbed me. So I had to do something about it. And
so for you, it became about how do you help people demystify or de-stressify the whole Medicaid process? And what happened? How did you solve that problem?
Well, I solved that problem, frankly, by I kept running into this outfit called Lawyers with Purpose.
Okay.
And I finally said, okay, what's the worst that could happen if I put in the phone call, right? That's kind of always my, okay, how can this get worse, right? It can't. So I called, and frankly, the rest for me is history. Now, the folks that deal with me at Lawyers with Purpose will tell you it took me a year. That first phone call, and when I said sign me up. But in that year, I proved to myself that I really can't help anybody with what I know.
So you needed the structure to help you understand it and be able to apply it to others. That's really important. You know what I love about that story, Lydia, is I always tell people a year is going by anyway. The only difference is what you're doing during that year. And how many years ago was that?
I looked at the calendar, that was 5 years ago now.
Yeah, so see that? So not only did the year go by, but it's been 5 years since. And so your practice today, what are you doing? Tell me what the most exciting part of your practice is. And
today, the most exciting part of my practice is I'm a Medicaid missionary, basically.
Gotcha.
Is explaining to people, and as I encounter people, I tell them, okay, your world, you're asking about something that is so far into the weeds. A lot of my colleagues in the bar really don't know anything about it. That's just the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I know everything, but I know I can help you.
Yeah.
Okay. By either demystifying, explaining. We're in a state that does community-based services.
Yeah.
So there's that, that we need to sort of deal with and plan for. But I used to attend my Chamber of Commerce meetings, and I would tell them, I said, we all plan to age, but do we have a plan to actually be old?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So as we kind of come into the home stretch of our conversation today, I understand that you're pretty active with some online planning now.
I am. So based on my experience with
Uh-huh.
the field, okay, I was aware that a lot of people will do that who won't do anything else. Okay.
That free, fill out the form they did online, you got the email, right?
Okay. And when I became aware of an opportunity to bring that to my practice, okay, unlike that year that I spent thinking about lawyers
Right.
with purpose, I was like, this is something I need to be involved in, okay,
Yeah.
because I've done it before, frankly. I feel like I've done it before. And then two, if anything that we learned during the pandemic was that there are a whole lot of things that we can do online,
Right.
but sometimes that only gets you so far.
Gotcha.
And so actually just this morning, I was at a morning meeting talking with the paralegal of a colleague who doesn't do this area of law at all, actually. And, she was saying the topic today was innovation. And so, are you doing anything innovative? I said, well, as a matter of fact, I am.
Cool. So innovation. So I love that. You see it as innovation. Now, you haven't said what you're doing. Just give a brief explanation of what that is so the listener would have an idea.
Sure. I'm talking about Guider.
Okay. And for someone who's never heard of Guider, what is that enabling you to do as a lawyer?
What that's enabling me as a lawyer to do is to basically be available 24/7 for people who want to do basic will, healthcare directive, power of attorney, who want to make sure that's done correctly. And I can be available to them. I can actually help them with the document, creating it. And then they can either choose to engage with me, or they can take it and do, with clear instruction how they need to get it properly executed. And
so you enable now clients can go to your website as a lawyer and do their documents and choose to have you review them with them and sign them, or they could sign them themselves and Guider provides them all the necessary legal instructions to do that.
Exactly.
And it brought you back to your Shield world, but in a much more modern approach.
I think this is a better thing because, as I was going through those will questionnaires, like I said, and then when I say it's a standard questionnaire, I believe they use that at every legal Shield jurisdiction. Okay, so
Right.
there's so much, you need to figure out what you need for your documents. And it was about 20% of my world, or 20% of my work week, maybe not a work day, but a work week would be about 20% of my time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, okay, but here, I think the objective difference is that here, they can either choose to engage with you, they can choose to do more. It becomes, from my perspective, an entree into my potential client's world.
Yeah.
And they can say, well, gee, I never really thought about that,
So it's a way for your prospects and clients to learn what you do without having to physically talk to you, but while maintaining all of your legal ethical standards and helping them be confident that they're actually getting this advice from a lawyer and a law firm, not from a self-help website.
Exactly, because again, we've all done it. We go Googling things, and recently I was Googling a recipe, just a plain old recipe. Okay. I'll be specific, it was for smoked lamb or leg of lamb.
Okay.
I haven't decided yet. And I was really just looking to see what kind of woods were they using to do this.
Right.
I'm confident with my ability to smoke things. I was, what are they doing? And one recipe I read, and this is a true thing, I couldn't believe it when I got to the end, and it's like, well, they've told me everything I need to know, what temperature, I didn't see what wood they were using. So I went back and searched on that site for the word wood or chunk, or one of the fruit, and it wasn't there. They did a whole recipe on something they called smoked lamb and didn't
tell you what they used to smoke it.
And I decided, okay, these people weren't really serious.
Right.
that's what can happen when you confine your search to Google.
Right.
You can find out that your source knows a lot, but doesn't have what you're really looking for.
But what I'm hearing is, and again, in our last 2 minutes here, it sounds like you found a way that you can provide your legal services to people in a way that's amenable to them. That, kind of like in the old Shield days, you now feel like you're more accessible to your client, and they can decide whether they want to do it themselves or whether they want to come in for a review. But either way, you're confident that the documents they're getting meet your standards, and the education they got in the process of delivering meet your standard as if they came and met with you.
That's exactly right. And it's always, frankly, an homage to my parents, who were both educators. And
Gotcha.
while I failed to follow in what has become a family tradition, because almost everybody else is a teacher, I still educate people. And
I was just say, I would almost say you are an educator. Now that you've got this thing, you're actually able to educate 24/7, 365. Really kind of cool.
Exactly.
So what words of wisdom to someone listening who might be struggling in a decision to learn about Medicaid or to learn about any new part of the law? What words of wisdom around technology and your application of this use guide, or mindset requirements? What are some insights you would share for a listener?
I think an important thing to keep, if not necessarily in front of mind, to just remember is that you need to learn to balance on, I would call them, uncertain surfaces. But to do that, you need to have good systems. Okay. Whenever I find that I'm having trouble managing things, or if I figure out that things are not necessarily being addressed on a timely basis, first of all, as a solo practitioner, I know where the problem is, but more specifically, I know that I haven't been maintaining my systems as I should. Because
Gotcha.
if I've got good systems, I'll know exactly where I am with everything. And that's
trusting systems gives you support that you could sleep at night. So having those systems that in place to ensure that you're meeting all your objectives as the attorney for clients and for yourself, that's a really important element for you.
It's a crucial and critical. I'm known in my family, I'm known as the planner. Okay.
Yeah.
And being able to sort of keep track of that, there's multiple things that one does, but it's all about a system in place, and more specifically, documenting what it is.
Yeah. And that system, how did you accomplish this? So you have that in place. How did you do? So if someone doesn't have systems, how would they come about to do that?
You know what? It's very much, as they say, how you eat an elephant. Okay.
Right.
It's one bite at a time. And you eventually get to a point where you can't do without the system.
Right.
And where, where you just, you need, what we're doing can be complex, but it need not be difficult. Okay?
Gotcha. So if you break it down to the standards and the processes and the systems, then you could take complex things and make them manageable.
Exactly. That's
cool.
There's no need to really, I don't need to reinvent the wheel on a lot of things. Okay.
Gotcha.
But what I'd really rather spend my time doing is making sure that my client understands their documents,
Mm-hmm.
and that they're into a plan that will make sense to them, and that they are going to end up in the right place.
I like that. What I'm hearing you say, Lydia, is that for you, your job is to make sure you're counseling the client and getting their needs met. And you have come to rely on the LWP systems to manage all the other stuff so that you're not falling off track and you're able to meet all those clients' needs. And why reinvent it if they're there? So again, a lot of them, it took you a little while to get to them because you got to bite off a little at a time. But ultimately, you find the ones that are the most important to you, and then that enables you to focus on being the lawyer. That's right. The key takeaway I'm hearing.
That's exactly right, because and in this area, some of our other colleagues may accuse us of being paper pushers. But I will tell them two things. I said, first of all, we know exactly what's in that paper. And B, as I often tell people, through hard tuition, my clients will ask, because standard will in this state, in the LWP system, it's almost 20, it's over 20 pages or about 20 pages. And they said, why do I need all of that? And I said, because when we need it, we won't be able to put it back in.
Right. So you don't need all of it, but you want to know it's there when you do need it.
I think the phrase that I've come up with lately is I try to plan for the inevitable and the unexpected.
I love it. Thank you. I love your casualness. What I also love is I love how you're a true testament to just keep moving forward. Trust in if somebody's built systems and processes, use them, take them at your pace, and then, but ultimately focus on being the lawyer. And then with this new technology, be the lawyer all the time if you can be. Give them access to you even when you can't be there for them personally.
That's pretty much it. I think that capsulizes it very nicely.
Thank you so much. Why don't you just share your firm name and where you are in case anybody ever wants to reach out to you.
Thank you. I'm Lydia York at L.E. York Law in Wilmington, Delaware.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lydia. Continued success.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Practice Success Podcast. Visit www.lawyerswithpurpose.com/podcast to listen to other episodes and to subscribe. We'll see you next time.